Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of Tech Talk webinars. Today, we're very happy to have Silvan Tschopp, the head of solution architecture at Open Systems, here with us. Silvan will be discussing why you should stop treating your network like a network. As always, please be sure to type your questions into that Q&A box as they occur to you, and we will have a live Q&A with our speaker after the presentation. So once again, thanks for joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Silvan. Enjoy.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Before I talk about why we all should stop treating our networks like networks, I would first like to look at how digital transformation has impacted the typical wide area network over the past few years. We learn how SD-WAN can be leveraged to resolve many of the existing issues. And we also talk how to address the new challenges that are introduced by such new technologies. With digital transformation, the wide area network has become critical strategic infrastructure. Let's look at this in more detail. As we can see in this quote from an article about how the WAN is driving digital transformation, we could really ask ourselves, what is the main driver here? Is it the demand from the business that asks for a change in the network architecture? Or is it a changing network that enables digital transformation across the business? Probably it's a mix of both of them, because what we often see with our customers is that they have a specific business need or business driver, and that could, for example, be the adoption of Office 365, that then really drives a change in how the network is being handled within the company. It's a typical business project that then has direct impact on the underlying network. But as soon as this initial project is done and the network is re-architectured, then this opens up a wide new range of possibilities, and hence then the network again drives innovation on how the business actually runs on top of that network. When we look at these top three answers from the WAN Summit in New York earlier this year, we see that the majority of participants, they mention improving the network performance as one of their top drivers. What is interesting is when I first joined that conference about 3 years ago, back then it was all about cutting costs. So it's interesting just to see how quickly the mindset has shifted for such a new technology that is now not only about cost cutting, which is still a major driver obviously, but really about how the network performance can be improved, and hence how this new network can really drive digital transformation. So first of all, let's start looking at how a traditional wide area network used to look like, and often still does up to today. As we see here, is the wide area network is centered around a headquarter or a data center in a typical star topology. There is a closed MPLS network, typically by one or even a few providers that connect each location to each other, but they're primarily all connected, or all traffic is backhauled to the data center. That's where the applications are hosted, that's where storage is, that's where the internet breakout is. So it's really all traffic is always going through the data center. This can be one location, but often it's maybe 2 or 3, depending on how global a company is and how different regions there are. There's a lot of pros to that approach, because it's really easy to control all the traffic, because all traffic is going through that main data center. It's easy to manage. You have all visibility. You can really control and enforce policies in there. That also means security, for example. You can have your entire security posture in the data center, and hence it's very easy to manage and control the policies that you want to apply in your wide area network. When we look at what new requirements digital transformation introduces, it's really applications, they move to the cloud. We see here, for example, email, it's consumed out of the cloud, Office 365 as a typical example. But even such big monoliths like SAP, Oracle, and so on and so forth, they're now more and more being consumed as cloud services. We also have to deal with unified collaboration. People that use voice over IP, chat functionalities, video chat all over, no matter where they are. There's people that are on the road. They're roaming, they want to use their mobile phones, laptops, and everything, kind of typical bring your own device approach, and they want to have a seamless experience no matter where in the world, in what location they are. But then there is also IoT devices, especially for manufacturing companies, but also many other enterprises have to deal with IoT devices that need access to the internet. They need open networks, and this is still a big challenge in the current architecture. When we look at how the old infrastructure or the whole architecture copes with these requirements, we really see a couple of challenges here. One major driver obviously is bandwidth. With all that increased amount of traffic or the increase in bandwidth requirements, this really makes MPLS costs explode. Sometimes it's not even possible to increase your MPLS lines and provide the bandwidth that the business and the users would need. So the headquarter typically becomes a performance bottleneck very quickly. It's all traffic backhauling in there, it's just not sustainable anymore. But it's not only about bandwidth, it's really about agility in general. What if you have new sites, new business acquisitions that were made, and new sites need to be integrated into the network quickly? Doesn't it sound familiar that sometimes you have to wait for months until your preferred line provider has provided some fiber into your remote location? So these are really challenges that many companies face these days. Another thing is about visibility into your network, visibility into what applications run onto your network, but also visibility into what shadow IT exists. Users that are on the road, that use their own devices, they often just use whatever is easiest for them, and that often ends up in not negligible risk for a company, because it might be unsanctioned applications that are not meant for business and enterprise use, and hence might really result in compliance risk for you as a company. Now, when we look at SD-WAN, software-defined wide area network, this really is the answer to many of these new business requirements. When we look at how the architecture changes, it's really that it's not anymore centered around your main hub location, but it's centered around the applications. Centered around applications in the cloud. They could still be part of your data center, but it's really centered around where the applications are. It also provides access to the users and devices no matter where they are located. So users, no matter where they are, they should have closest access to the applications as possible. So meaning we would leverage local breakouts at your branch offices, but obviously also for clients that are on the road, to be able to consume the cloud services as locally as possible. Also, by introducing internet as a transport medium, direct internet access lines or even broadband lines, this really helps to increase your bandwidth, your available bandwidth, and hence you can really cope with the increased demands of bandwidth requirements. Typically, having multiple providers also helps in getting more resilience towards failover and outage scenarios, but really helps you to load balance your traffic and your applications based on what your applications need. So you really have methods to control the traffic on your network because you have much more visibility into your network, and hence you can control it the way you need. I spoke about local breakouts before, but I just want to mention here is really the benefit of it is also we see that typically or typical enterprise network, you can offload as much as 70% of your traffic directly towards the internet. So all this traffic hence does not have to be hairpinned back to your data center and therefore consumes or frees a lot of bandwidth in your main data center. So these are all benefits that that motivate such a change in architecture of an existing wide area network, and all driven basically by the need for digital transformation that often come from the business perspective. So, but SD-WAN does not come without unexpected complexity and its own challenges. Often, this new distributed design adds a lot of complexity that needs to be managed. You need a lot of internal skills and know-how to be able to implement and later on operate such a solution, which is quite challenging these days, as we all know that resources are often scarce or just there are different priorities. Then also, and this is personally for me one of the major exposures here and then often get neglected, is really that the security exposure increases dramatically just because you connect all your branch offices to the internet. So every branch site immediately is not only connected to some private network, but it is exposed to all the threats and evil stuff that is out there in the internet. And the main question that arises here is, who is responsible for the security? Who is now, like, suddenly there is a network initiative called SD-WAN that implies that there is suddenly way more risk on the security side that then has to be handled by the security teams. So what we see is there is typically a shared responsibility between those teams or organizations, but that needs to be addressed at a very early stage in such a project. Now, as we have seen how things evolved over the years, I would like to have a look at how we at Open Systems address these challenges. So when we look at how enterprises today can implement and operate their SD-WAN infrastructure, we typically see three different ways. You're probably all familiar with either do-it-yourself or conventional managed services, and I quickly want to recapitulate what we understand of this and where we see challenges. So do-it-yourself DIY it requires a lot of resources, it requires a lot of know-how that you need to build up and carry internally, and your staff has to cope up with a very fast set or changing set of technology. There's often also hidden costs because there's for sure stuff that will surface during the project that you were not aware of, and hence you also could not incorporate into a budget. So that's why a lot of companies, they look at managed services. They want to have somebody that takes care of it for them. But what we see is that typical or conventional managed services, they're just not too much different from a DIY approach, except it's done by somebody else. We often see that typical managed service provider, that's not the only thing they do, right? They have a vast set of services that they can provide, and hence they are not experts in SD-WAN either. So they typically charge a lot of hours, just kind of professional service hours that then accumulate onto your bill just until the entire project is done. So the challenge here is really, while you believe you just outsource the task to somebody that knows, the service provider, they also only know what they do know about the corresponding products they want to manage and operate, and they also just depend on their provider's roadmap and support and so on and so forth. And that's why we at Open Systems, we believe that that we are a sole kind of provider for SD-WAN, and that we build and manage our own secure SD-WAN platform. And I come to this in a minute. For us, the operations piece is always in the back of our mind, really, because we believe that if you cannot operate your network in a smooth way, then all the features that you might get from a product, they're just not worth it. Because you want your network to be stable enough to provide, to provide to the business to innovate and accelerate and move on. And then last but not least, we really feel that the integration of having security and network combined is the way to go today, and that's where the market is growing to, and we really feel that those two things have to be looked at together. So when we look at the managed secure SD-WAN solutions by Open Systems a little more in detail, it's basically those three components. I just mentioned the purposely built SD-WAN platform. So the question is, what does this mean, right? So we really build our own platform that is there to provide secure SD-WAN functionality, and hence we've tightly integrated things like monitoring or configuration management, lifecycle management, technology risk. This is really all built into the service and built into the platform right away. We offer a single pane of glass to our customers that is unrivaled to our competition. So it's really a web portal where you get all the transparency into the box or into the functionalities that you need. And then the built-in security, I mentioned that before, a risk that is often neglected when looking at an SD-WAN solution. And that's why we feel security has to be an integral part of your SD-WAN solution from the very beginning. Open Systems, we've started as a network integrator, and we brought banks to online to the internet in the early 90s. So security has always been part of our DNA. And by now, looking at the entire SD-WAN from a holistic point of view and includes security NFVs, or like network virtualized functions, into the network stack, allows us to really provide an entire view of the network together with a security portfolio. And then the last piece here, it's really kind of focusing on our experts being also your experts, meaning that all the engineers within Open Systems, they approximately work 20% of their time in operations. So this means we do not have a level 1 or level 2 support, but we directly engage level 3 engineers. So when customers call in, they directly have an L3 engineer on the phone, which is skilled and educated and has the permissions to do the required changes on your infrastructure right away. So you always get the support that you need, and that's really what eventually helps us to provide an unrivaled customer experience, and that's kind of what our customers love about Open Systems. Apart from that operations model, we also have a dedicated technical account team that is always assigned to our customers. So it's really not about just kind of an outsourcing partner, but really a vendor or a provider that helps you to kind of look at eye level, discuss your challenges at that eye level, and decide on where the future of our customers' networks should move together, and how customers can help us shape our own roadmap as well. I know this all sounds nice and it's kind of easy to say and explain, but it always is different when you can see and feel it. And that's why I just want to show a few screenshots from our portal. I mentioned it before, that's the customer portal that we provide to the administrators at the customers. can be central administrators, global administrators, but also IT responsibles at the branch offices or in the region that then have access to the information that that we provide from a network and security perspective. So what you can see here is this is the so-called dashboard, the entry point. That's kind of where you get a high-level view of how healthy your network currently is and what is going on both from a networking as well as a security standpoint. We see pretty much on top what is the current status of the network, where are all your nodes located on a global scale, how healthy are they so far, do we have any outages present in the network, or is there any downtime and so on and so forth ongoing. When we look at the middle layer here, that's all focused around applications. So what are the applications running on your network? What is going on at each location? But then also from a security point of view is like what kind of threats have you seen in the recent few hours, days, or months? And interestingly here is the interesting point, it's all on global scale. So the dashboard really is on an entire company level. And each of these tiles here, each of these information widgets, you can then drill down to a specific location or even down to a specific user. So you can really find all the information that you need. For example, what applications have been accessed by what set of users, or what kind of threats, what kind of IDS alerts have you seen at what specific location. And then the bottom layer, this is more around the operations. We see ticketing is tightly integrated here with change and incident management, but also then the connectivity piece where we are monitoring ISP circuits for you. We can even start or help to troubleshoot, reach out to ISP providers in case we monitor any issue with a specific line at a specific location. And this is actually what we see a bit in more detail. We see that ISP monitoring here of a specific line. We see how well has it performed, what was the availability over the previous month. And then when we see there was a specific outage, it's all tracked in here. So what we see here is as soon as an outage surpasses a few minutes, then we raise a corresponding ticket, which helps in audit trail, which helps in follow-up here, so that we always are on top of the game and can, as mentioned before, either inform you proactively or directly reach out to an ISP provider and see what might be the potential challenge or issue with a specific ISP line. When we look at the application widget or the usage here, this really shows us, as I mentioned before, insight into what applications are accessed by our users. We see what are the top applications by volume, or what are the top locations, what locations might generate most traffic here. And as mentioned before, this is really interesting to see, especially when you start to, or when local breakout is new to you, to understand how much traffic is actually split up by just kind of routing traffic to the internet out locally and not backhauling it to the data center. And as well here, we can drill down into specific time intervals, or we could focus on specific locations only, and hence we get a very clear picture of what is going on. Obviously then have more details such as the application policies, are they routed over link A or link B and why, and has traffic been rerouted because of a link outage, and so on and so forth. So we looked at the connectivity piece, kind of the bottom layer. We then went on to the application stack, kind of the SD-WAN feature. And then on top of it is always the security stack, which in this case is kind of highlighted by our network security monitoring or kind of threat protection. And here it's again on a global scale where you see like how many alerts have been raised on at a specific location. And the goal here is pretty much every SD-WAN appliance or SD-WAN node in the network at the same time is also an IDS sensor. So as we see traffic passing through the network appliance, we immediately get all the security insights and can then cross-correlate them on a global level and understand how, where are potential threats, where are our users, or where is potentially infected devices, and this can then be brought up to our customers for proactive alerting, proactive management, and quick escalation and resolution in case of severe incidents on a security level. And then also here, again, this is only the global view, but we can always drill down here and then see at each and every event, understand what or why was this event triggered. For every triggered event, we capture a few network packets around that event, and hence we always have insight into what potential traffic was going on, which facilitates the understanding of that, if that might have been a false positive or if you're really dealing with a true positive here. And the goal is, I mean, often traditional network or IDS products, they have the challenge that the network teams, security teams, they get flooded with number of events. And what we do here is we really correlate those events on a global scale so that we can correlate them by host. And hence we assign every host a threat score based on the number and the severity of events that the corresponding host triggered. So we're not dealing with only single event information, but we're really taking this on a higher level and look at it from a host perspective, which then gives us such a global overview. This is just a very brief overview of our web GUI, our portal, and how we look at applications, network, and security stuff in general. What we see here is applications, they've really moved from data center to the cloud over the past few years. It's an incredible speed that these migrations are going, and we have to deal with various types of like software as a service, infrastructure, platform as a service. So this is really changing our environments very quickly. And that's why also networkings have changed and adapted to those needs. We just looked at this before. But now, as we see, as security really has to follow along. It doesn't work the same way. We cannot just deal with the security principles as we've done before. We have to adapt to how the network and the applications change and really think about how the security posture can be adapted to that change of environments. And it's very interesting actually to see that Gartner, for example, they just released a new category, so to say, a couple of weeks ago. They found that interesting name SASE for SASE, that stands for Secure Access and Service Edge. And what they write in there, it's really about the convergence of network functions and security functions coming together. And they see a huge shift in the market from plenty of providers that go into this direction. So it's really a very exciting time to be in this field and to see like how things will evolve over the next couple of years. But I'm sure you're all wondering why you should stop treating your networks like networks and what the future is bringing us. I've mentioned it before, we've seen applications moving to the cloud, but it's typically not just single environments, but workloads, they are spread all across the multiple regions, multiple cloud service providers. So it's really a very diverse field of where your applications are hosted. So SD-WAN provides ways to connect all those workloads together in all those destinations, and you really have kind of the different ways to approach this. So either you, for example, deploy native SD-WAN appliances as virtualized environments directly in your cloud setups. So you can really, for example, in the Open Systems case, we can deploy our SD-WAN appliance in the well-known cloud service providers environments. But you could also use cloud interconnect ways, for example, ExpressRoute or Direct Connect to correct your legacy data centers with the cloud. And there's really different means to achieve the same thing that highly depends on your business requirements. But then it's not only about connecting your physical on-prem WAN network to the cloud, but suddenly you have actually a whole new set of possibilities, for example, by using the cloud provider's backbone. So one could ask oneself, is like, do I as a company have to build my own backbone using premium circuits, using MPLS lines, using even direct lines, peer-to-peer links, or couldn't I just use an established backbone network, for example, from Microsoft? So Microsoft, whenever you route traffic between various instances in different Azure regions, they guarantee you that traffic remains on the Microsoft network, and hence you reach best or ideal performance possible. It obviously comes at a cost, so one has to look at the benefit and the total cost of ownership here, but it really opens up a whole new set of possibilities. So it is. You really see the clearly defined perimeter that we've got used to for many years, it starts to dissolve. So we have the network spreads out to various third parties, cloud providers, whatever, and hence the security has to follow along. So this is really, as mentioned before, kind of starts to merge together, but there is not a clearly defined line anymore as we've got used to over the past few years. What is even more interesting is that, what we've learned is that a cloud is just somebody else's data center, right? It's not something magic that exists all over the world and so on and so forth. And we see that cloud service providers, they've invested heavily to bring their cloud POPs as close to the users as possible. And on the bottom right, what we see is even a company such as Chick-fil-A, they've actually adopted cloud mechanisms and deploy them at each and every store. So they heavily use cloud technology and hence kind of provide their own private cloud in each and every of their stores. And this is something special or something new, but we really see that even the big cloud service providers provide services such as Azure Stack or Amazon Outpost, where you can benefit of those cloud technologies in your on-prem locations. So it's basically like as if the cloud was coming back to us. So it's not only the edge moving to the cloud, but it's somehow the cloud getting back to the edge with the goal of really having the compute resources or having the capabilities that cloud technology provides these days as close to the user or to the data where it is really needed. This is why I think this quote from Satya Nadella is a perfect summary for the message of my talk here. Because while the world might focus on new products and technologies for end users and consumers, I think it is our chance and responsibility as network architects to ensure that our networks not only support the business requirements, but that we can actively drive them. That's it. I'm now very much looking forward to your questions.
Hi, everybody. Silvan, thanks so much for being here today, and thanks again for that presentation. We are now taking Q&A, so again, please feel free to send over any questions you may have for Silvan. So Silvan, a few questions that have already come in. How do you leverage SD-WAN to connect to the cloud?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. This is a very good question because eventually it's all about the cloud these days, and SD-WAN is really a leverage to help you connect to the cloud. And I mean, typically every cloud provider provides you means to connect there, and it really depends on how or what is the use case. So if you just host some web applications, or if you want to access software as a service in the cloud, then typically it's best to just access it over the plain internet. But as a lot of enterprises, they still do some lift and shift. They do put their applications into the cloud, just kind of from on-prem to the cloud, and they have workloads that need to be accessed on a private network, internally through their WAN. And that's where SD-WAN really comes into play, either by using native methods, basically put an SD-WAN appliance into the cloud environment and integrate the cloud environment just as yet another branch office. And there's really different options to do this. There is also connectivity options such as direct interconnects, they're called, express routes, for example, for Azure, or direct connect for Amazon. That we help to facilitate, because in the end, it's the routing is complicated. You want to make sure that you don't have a single point of failure, and that you can seamlessly fail over between different types of connectivity between your core network as well as the cloud environment.
Okay, great. And Justin is asking, is this anything like Trend Micro? And if so, how is it different from Trend Micro?
So I'd say Trend Micro is, at least from what I know about them, is part of it, kind of a subset of what we provide. Our portfolio is way more broader than what Trend Micro provides. And but then in the end, the question, we would have to understand in more detail what specific pieces of Trend Micro Justin is referring to here.
Okay, great. So we can follow up on that with Justin after the fact. Ralph asked, can your SD-WAN solution support hybrid environments? Some sites with SD-WAN edges, while some sites have SD-WAN edges while other sites do not.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I mean, this is a core concept of SD-WAN that you base or that you support the hybrid environment. It's often needed during transition, obviously, because a big network you cannot migrate as a big bang. So this is often we see that during transition phases. But even once the majority of a company's network is on SD-WAN, you still have locations that are different, because maybe there is still other contracts that need to be fulfilled, or it's just in an entire transitioning process. But also that for SD-WAN itself, you want to be independent of transport. You want to be transport agnostic. You want to leverage the best transport that is available for a specific location, and that can range from MPLS to premium internet circuits, and even go to LTE or satellite connections. So yes, SD-WAN really uses transport as agnostic, and excels when it is able to have or to operate on a hybrid environment.
Okay, and just to follow up from Ralph, he has another question. How does your SD-WAN solution improve connectivity to SaaS applications, which only connect via the internet without an SD-WAN edge in the SaaS cloud?
That's also a very good point, because in the end, that's what you lose when you connect to SaaS applications. And I think one of the primary points here is really ensuring that the users, they break out as close to the cloud environment as possible, so that we do not hairpin traffic to some sort of internet breakout, and hence we add additional latency. This is certainly one of the big factors here to keep latency to the endpoint as low as possible. But then on the other hand, also to be able to steer routing based on the performance. So let's say the user is at a location that has 2 or 3 ISP links, and primarily you want to route that critical SaaS application over the best performing ISP, or like your primary ISP line. But then there may be a hiccup in that provider's backbone, or the path has altered for whatever reason, and SD-WAN can then basically dynamically route traffic to any of the other available ISPs, so to guarantee that the user always gets the best performance.
And Ralph also would like to know, does your solution support access to the SD-WAN from mobile devices, smartphones, tablets, Road Warrior laptops, etc.?
Yes, exactly. So we one part of the solution is we call it mobile entry point. It's based on Cisco ASA, where we Cisco, and the beauty of it, it's kind of also basically it can turn on an entry point on every SD-WAN appliance, no matter where it is globally, and hence you can really direct your users to the nearest entry point into the SD-WAN. And the benefit is not only to then have your users be part of the SD-WAN and use the SD-WAN backbone, but also be able to provide the security posture that you've enabled, or that you've kind of built for the users in your WAN, and like in your office network, but you can then reach that out to mobile users as well.
Great. And Ralph, I know you said you missed the first part of the presentation. We will have that presentation on demand on our Tech Talks website, so we will be sure you get the link to Silvan's entire presentation after the fact. Moving on to some more questions. First of all, Jeffrey would like to thank you for a great presentation, and thank you for the information, Silvan. So Jeffrey, thanks for joining us. Ryan is asking, are all the management services shown in the dashboard, such as threat management, application recognition, etc., included in one rate, or is each service available at an additional cost?
So the cost, or the pricing structure is built in a way that we have a core bundle. We call it the Secure SD-WAN bundle, and there is various flavors of it. But depending on what flavor you get, you pretty much get all the services around that. And then on top of that core bundle, you can add additional services on top that we call the add-ons. And for example, the mobile entry point that I mentioned before is a typical add-on that our customers get to the core SD-WAN services. And another add-on is email security. So to be able to also control or kind of secure your incoming email traffic, pretty much filter for spam, viruses, provide phishing protection, and all this. So those two are typical examples that are added on top of the SD-WAN service, and that also have an additional cost factor. But the bundles itself, they're basically priced per user basis. So it's really a user bundle price. And hence, once you have that subscription, the license, the monthly license, you can really use that features globally in all your locations that you need. And yeah, really be able to budget it. It includes the entire service. It includes an unlimited number of change and incident requests. And hence, you really have full control over your costs and can really plan that over the term of the licensing.
Great. And Ryan is following up with a question. Are the SD-WAN appliances capable of true mesh networking, connecting directly to one another, or are they linked via hub and spoke?
So we have the full flexibility of building the network that suits the customer's environment best. We typically establish a multi-star approach, as we call it. We typically do not recommend to use a global full mesh in the entire global infrastructure. But what we typically approach is to have regional setup, regional star topologies, but within a particular region have every site connecting with a full mesh to each other. And there is plenty of reasons why we would do that, and I'm very happy to go into this in more detail in a follow-up conversation.
Great. And Mark would like to know, if you haven't addressed this already, Silvan, how does the open system solution handle load balancing across multiple connections? Per packet, per session, or flow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's also a very good question, and really depends on the type of traffic. So for real-time applications such as voice over IP, we typically do packet load balancing. Then for low priority applications such as backup or email and so on and so forth, we typically do session-based.
So are end user connections, TCP flows, terminated when traffic has to be moved from one link to another, or are the sessions maintained?
They are maintained.
They're maintained. And how much is a per user license for, say, 500 users? Is that something you want to follow up with Kevin about after the fact?
Yeah, Kevin, please reach out to us, and I'm happy to provide you those answers. I don't have it top of my head. I would also have to reach out to my sales colleagues here.
Yeah, and we will definitely follow up with that information after the presentation today with great points of contact for you for the Open Systems team. We have a lot of people writing in that it was a great presentation. A few more questions. And again, we have a few more minutes, folks, so if you have any more questions, please feel free to send those our way. Let me see. Right now, we have Ryan asking us, let me pull this up, how does SD-WAN help in accessing cloud resources and services?
So it's somewhat similar to what I mentioned in some of the previous questions. It really depends on what kind of cloud resources we're talking about. If we look at SaaS applications, then it's really the local breakout that provides a big benefit here, being able to steer traffic based on available links and redirect if we see performance issues. But then also to be able to integrate cloud environments natively into the SD-WAN. And basically, any cloud environment, especially if it's infrastructure as a service, it's just like another data center in somebody else's data center. So it's really, you want to be able to integrate that site into your wide area network. And that's our typical approach, is to deploy an SD-WAN appliance virtually in the cloud, and hence we can integrate it natively and establish tunnels to that location the same way. The benefit of that approach is really that by having our SD-WAN appliance in the cloud, we can immediately also benefit of all the other features such as firewalling, secure web gateway, IDS, IPS. So we suddenly get those features that obviously are helpful for cloud environments too.
Great. And now, Silvan, if you want to touch on what challenges does SD-WAN pose?
Yeah, that's also a good and important question. And in my personal view, I think the challenge of the speed of technology is really crucial here. We see a lot of customers that are used to manage their networks on their own. They used to kind of have one provider that they can call if they have issues, like ISP providers where they get their MPLS from. And when you move now to SD-WAN, you suddenly face the challenge that you, first of all, likely will have multiple providers that you need to provision circuits from, that you have a very fast set of technology that changes very quickly. So you need to be able to absorb those resources yourself and build up the know-how to operate, to implement, to manage such technology. And then also, as mentioned in my talk, is open systems, we really believe that you cannot adopt SD-WAN without changing the mindset around security. So security needs to be handled differently. It gives a lot of opportunity when migrating to SD-WAN, but also poses a lot of threats in terms of the security landscape. And this really has to be handled well. And often we see customers that they have challenges with the network teams and the security teams that have different goals, different backgrounds, different kind of targets. And those two teams or organizations need to be aligned to successfully adopt SD-WAN. And I believe this is why a dedicated provider, like we as Open Systems, we can really help to facilitate those discussions, and we have the know-how and the expertise to deploy that in the field.
Great. Well, we are out of time today, but Silvan, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to everybody who joined us for today's Tech Talk webinar by Open Systems. If you missed any part of the webinar or there's anything that you would like to see again, this webinar will live on demand on our Tech Talk website on the webinar page under the Webinar on Demand tab, so be sure to visit that page if you'd like to revisit the webinar. We will also follow up with you with an email with a link where you can view the webinar on demand. Thanks again, everyone, and hope you have a great day. Thank you, Silvan.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining.